This is Atlas, speaking to you from Station Zebra. It's 1900 hours. 10 days have passed since my last transmission. I'll save the pleasantries because time is a luxury we don't have. If you're tuning in, it means you've made it through another stretch of hell, and that's worth noting. You're still breathing. That matters. Let's get straight to the point. The world outside our shelters isn't waiting for us to catch up. It's accelerating. It's relentless. Every day brings new challenges, new threats, and fewer places to hide. I'm here to help you stay one step ahead. The last 10 days have been a blur of movement, observation, and constant recalibration. The invaders aren't sitting still, and neither should we. I've moved Station Zebra to a new location after spotting increased drone patrols near the old site. The relocation wasn't clean, nothing ever is, but it was necessary. While scouting a potential setup, I found something that chilled me. Near a collapsed industrial park, there was a clearing where the ground had been scorched into perfect concentric circles. No signs of impact, no debris, just a faint, acrid smell that made my skin crawl. Whatever caused it, it wasn't human and it wasn't natural. If you see anything like this, turn around and don't look back. The air feels heavier these days, doesn't it? Like the atmosphere itself is pressing down on us. I've been monitoring weather patterns, or what passes for them now. Storms are rolling through with increasing intensity, leaving behind skies thick with ash and something else. Survivors from the eastern zones have started reporting what they're calling glass rain. Tiny shards, razor thin and almost invisible until they slice through whatever's unfortunate enough to be in their path. These storms are fast, and the glass rain lingers in the aftermath, coating the ground and making it treacherous to move. If you're caught in one, find cover immediately. Reinforce your shelters if you can. Tarps and cloth won't cut it anymore. Silent zones are spreading faster than we anticipated. If you ventured near Zone G3 or Ashrock Valley, you might have noticed the eerie stillness. It's not just the absence of noise, it's the absence of life. Equipment fails within these zones. Radios go dead, batteries drain faster, and compasses spin uselessly. I don't have answers yet, but the patterns are undeniable. Silent zones are expanding outward like ripples in a pond. Whether it's a natural phenomenon or the invaders' doing, I can't say. What I can say is this: avoid these areas at all costs. If you find yourself in one, don't linger. Get out before you lose more than your signal. We've been observing new invader machines in the past week. Massive, crab-like constructs that move with unnerving precision, their legs piercing the ground as if they're digging for something. They emit bursts of green gas that cling to the air like fog, killing everything it touches. Grass turns black, trees collapse inward, and even the soil seems to wither under its influence. I watched one of these machines from a safe distance, and it stayed in place for hours, methodically releasing its poison in a perfect grid pattern. These things are clearing land, preparing it for something bigger. If you see one, stay as far away as possible. The gas doesn't just kill, it lingers, saturating the area long after the machine moves on. In the last 10 days, I've intercepted fragments of invader broadcasts. They're cryptic, heavily encrypted, but a few phrases stood out. Threshold unearthed, sector expansion, convergence zone. These aren't random words, they're deliberate, calculated. The invaders don't waste time on empty chatter. Each of these phrases carries weight, and if I had to guess, they're tied to whatever they're building out there. Pay attention to changes in the landscape. Strange patterns, new structures, anything out of the ordinary. They're not hiding their plans. They're daring us to figure them out. The world isn't the same one we knew 6 months ago. It's reshaping itself into something alien, something hostile. Every breath we take is a fight against the changes happening around us. But here's the thing, they expect us to crumble under the weight of it all. They expect us to give in, to fall apart. And yet, we're still here, clawing our way forward one day at a time. That's what they didn't plan for. Our resilience, our ingenuity, our refusal to go quietly. Keep that in mind as you listen. Keep that in mind as you fight for the next breath, the next step. This broadcast isn't about dwelling on the darkness. It's about shining a light, however small, into the void. And right now, that light is all we've got. Survivors, let's talk about the sky and the chaos it's been raining down on us. If you've been paying attention, and I know you have because staying oblivious is a death sentence, you've probably noticed that weather is no longer just weather. It's become a weapon. It's erratic, unforgiving, and unlike anything we've experienced before. In the past week alone, storms have erupted with almost no warning. They roll in fast, boiling clouds that churn with a sickly green hue. Lightning doesn't just streak the sky anymore, it spirals. Forked bolts twist unnaturally, sometimes looping back into the clouds like they're tethered to something above. Survivors near Zone E5 reported that one of these lightning strikes left a crater, perfectly circular, with glassy edges that still radiate heat hours after the storm passed. This isn't normal lightning. This is deliberate, whether it's the invaders manipulating the atmosphere or some side effect of their presence. I can't say. What I can say is that these storms aren't just hazards. They're signals. Pay attention to them. Then there's the ash. It's not just falling from the sky. It's everywhere now, kicked up by winds that feel too strong for their own good. It clings to everything, your clothes, your hair, your lungs. I've heard survivors describe coughing fits that last for hours, their throats raw and burned from the particles. If you're moving through these ash storms, cover your face with whatever you have. Layers of fabric soaked in water or even a scarf will buy you time. It won't filter everything, but it's better than breathing that poison directly. Now let's address the glass rain. I mentioned it briefly before, but it's worth repeating. Picture this. Tiny, needle-sharp fragments falling from the sky, almost invisible until they catch the light or slice through exposed skin. Survivors caught in these storms have described the sound it makes, like a faint, high-pitched hiss as the shards cut through the air. It's not natural. Can't be. The way it spreads, the way it lingers after the storm passes, blanketing the ground in a sparkling, lethal trap. It feels engineered. If you find yourself in one of these storms, your priority is shelter. Metal or concrete barriers are your best bet. Do not rely on tents or thin walls. The shards will rip through them like they're not even there. The aftermath of these storms is just as dangerous. The shards don't dissolve or break down. They stay, glittering on the ground, waiting for the unwary. I've already heard reports of survivors cutting themselves while trying to clear paths or salvage supplies. If you must handle the debris, use gloves, thick ones if you have them. Better yet, find another route. The risk isn't worth it. And then there are the winds. They howl with a force that feels personal, like they're hunting. Survivors near Zone G6 reported winds so strong they tore roofs off buildings, scattering debris that became lethal projectiles. One group described hearing a sound in the wind, low, guttural, almost like a growl. I can't confirm that, but it lines up with other reports of unnatural noises accompanying these weather phenomena. If the invaders are behind this, it's another layer of psychological warfare, making us fear the very air around us. Rain itself has changed too. It's no longer just water. Survivors in the southern regions have described rain that burns on contact, leaving red welts and eating through exposed fabric. I've seen the aftermath of one such storm. A row of vehicles stripped down to bare metal, paint and rubber dissolved entirely. This isn't acid rain as we once knew it. This is something new. If you encounter rain with a metallic smell or a strange color, get out of it immediately. And if you have no choice but to move through it, layer up. Multiple layers of clothing, tarps, anything you can find to shield your skin. It's not a perfect solution, but it might give you a chance. But the most disturbing reports come from survivors near the Black River. They've described fog banks rolling in that don't behave like fog. These aren't soft, gentle mists. They're dense, almost solid, and they move with purpose, engulfing areas in minutes. People caught in these fogs report feeling disoriented, nauseated, and some have claimed they heard whispers, faint voices speaking in a language they couldn't understand. Most never make it out to tell us more. If you see fog rolling in faster than it should, treat it as hostile. Move in the opposite direction, and don't stop until you're clear. It's easy to think of weather as a backdrop to the larger threats we face, but that mindset will get you killed. The skies have become just as much a battlefield as the streets and ruins we navigate. Every storm, every strange cloud formation, every unnatural shift in the air is a message, a reminder that we're no longer in control of the world we once called home. Stay vigilant, watch the skies, and if you see something that doesn't feel right, trust that instinct. It might just save your life. Let's shift focus to something that's been creeping across the landscape: silent zones. You've heard me mention them before, but the phenomenon has grown worse. These aren't just isolated patches of dead air anymore. They're expanding, merging, and swallowing entire regions. Survivors who've ventured too close have come back with stories that chill me, and some haven't come back at all. Here's what I know. Silent zones are areas where all sound seems to vanish. It's not just the absence of noise, it's the complete erasure of it. No wind, no rustling leaves, no distant hum of drones. Even the sound of your own footsteps feels muted, like the world itself is holding its breath. Radios stop working, compasses spin uselessly, and even basic electronics fail with no clear explanation. Survivors have reported a sensation of being watched, as if the silence itself has eyes. Zone G3 is the most recent casualty. What used to be a hub for scavengers, full of abandoned warehouses and an old train yard, has gone completely dark. I tried to reach a group station there, but all attempts to communicate were met with static. When I sent a runner to investigate, they described an unnatural stillness and an oppressive weight in the air, like the zone was actively pushing them out. They didn't stay long enough to dig deeper, and honestly, I don't blame them. The expansion isn't random. It's methodical, spreading outward like a tide. Ashrock Valley, which was barely touched a month ago, is now swallowed whole. Survivors in that region described seeing strange geometric patterns forming on the ground before the silence overtook the area. Spirals, interlocking lines, and shapes that seem to pulse faintly with light. Whatever this is, it's not natural. It feels purposeful. One of the more unsettling reports came from a small group who skirted the edge of Zone E7. They mentioned seeing figures moving in the distance, tall, humanoid shapes that didn't walk so much as glide. The figures never came closer, but the group said they felt an overwhelming urge to turn back, like an invisible wall was pressing against them. Whether these shapes were real or a hallucination brought on by the silence, I can't say. But the fact that multiple survivors have described similar experiences across different zones can't be ignored. Electromagnetic interference seems to be a hallmark of these zones. Radios don't just cut out, they die completely, and batteries drain within minutes of entering. Even analog devices are affected. A survivor told me they tried using an old wind-up flashlight, only to find that the light dimmed the closer they got to the center of the zone. It's as if these areas are consuming energy, feeding on it somehow. If you're relying on tech to navigate, don't. You'll be better off with a physical map and your own instincts. There's another layer to this. Silent zones aren't just dangerous, they're disorienting. Survivors who spend too much time inside report losing their sense of direction, even in familiar areas. One scavenger told me about walking in circles for hours, despite knowing the terrain like the back of their hand. Landmarks seemed to shift, and distances felt distorted. They eventually found their way out, but not before encountering something they could only describe as a shimmer, a wavering in the air, like heat rising off asphalt, except it followed them. I don't have answers for what's causing this. Theories range from invader experiments to some kind of environmental reaction to the fallout, but nothing concrete. What I do know is that these zones are expanding faster than anyone anticipated, and they're claiming more territory every day. If the trend continues, we're going to lose entire regions to whatever this is. One of the more alarming developments came from a survivor who managed to retrieve fragments of an invader transmission. The phrase silence integration was repeated multiple times. What does that mean? Is the silence a byproduct of something they're doing, or is it the goal itself? I can't say for certain, but the implications are grim. If the invaders are deliberately creating these zones, it's likely part of a larger strategy. They don't do anything without purpose. There's also the psychological toll to consider. Survivors who've spent too long near these zones describe feelings of paranoia, dread, and in some cases, complete emotional numbness. It's as if the silence seeps into your mind, eroding your will to keep moving. If you feel this happening, get out immediately. No supply cache, no scouting mission is worth losing yourself to whatever force is at work. If you're in an area that borders a silent zone, pay close attention to the signs. Watch for sudden changes in the environment, an absence of sound, strange patterns on the ground, or a shift in the air that feels wrong. These are warnings. Heed them. The closer you get, the harder it will be to escape. For now, all we can do is observe and adapt. Keep your distance, document what you see, and share any findings with others. Knowledge is our only weapon against this encroaching void. The silent zones are growing, and if we're not careful, they'll consume everything we have left. Survivors, let's talk about the machines. If you've been out there recently, you know the invaders aren't just relying on their overwhelming force. They're evolving their tactics and deploying new constructs, each more insidious than the last. These machines aren't just tools of destruction. They're calculated, precise instruments designed to dismantle what little we have left. In the past week, I've seen something new, something that's been reported across multiple zones. Massive, crab-like machines with metallic bodies that glint even under the dull skies. These constructs move low to the ground, their legs puncturing the earth with every step, leaving behind holes that ooze a strange, black fluid. They operate in slow, deliberate patterns, almost as if they're scanning the ground beneath them. I followed one of these machines from a distance for several hours. It paused every 100 yards, its body pulsing faintly as it released a greenish gas into the air. Whatever this gas is, it spreads low to the ground and clings to everything it touches. I've seen the aftermath. Vegetation withers within minutes, turning brittle and black. Animals caught in its path are left twisted, their bodies burned as if the gas eats them from the inside out. Even the soil itself seems poisoned, unable to sustain life. Survivors who've encountered these machines and live to tell the tale report burns on exposed skin and a persistent cough that doesn't go away. If you see one of these machines, keep your distance. The gas lingers long after the machine has moved on, and the ground it contaminates becomes a death trap for anyone who steps foot on it. These machines are being deployed in specific patterns, targeting areas that were previously fertile or populated. Fields, riverbanks, and even the outskirts of what used to be towns have been marked and cleared. It's as if the invaders are carving out zones for themselves, sterilizing the land to suit their needs. The question is, why? Are they preparing for long-term occupation? Or is this part of a larger plan to reshape the planet entirely? Drones have also been upgraded. In the last 10 days, I've spotted units equipped with reflective camouflage, making them nearly invisible against certain backdrops. One moment, the horizon looks clear. The next, a shimmering distortion reveals a drone hovering silently. These aren't the clunky, loud models we dealt with early on. They're faster, quieter, and equipped with sensors that detect more than just heat and movement. Survivors near Zone F1 reported a drone that responded to the faint clicking of a Geiger counter, targeting them before they even realized it was there. If you're dealing with drones, remember this: movement is their primary target. When you see one, stay low and stay still. If you're in open terrain, drop to the ground immediately. Camouflage is becoming more essential than ever. Mud, ash, anything to break up your silhouette and mask your heat signature can buy you precious seconds. And if you're forced to run, zigzag unpredictably. Drones are fast, but they're programmed to follow patterns. Confuse them. Now let's talk about the mechanical hounds. These things have always been terrifying, but reports suggest they've undergone modifications. Survivors in Zone B7 described hounds equipped with sonic disruptors, devices that emit high-frequency pulses capable of disorienting or stunning prey. These pulses aren't just loud. They create a physical impact, making it difficult to move or even think clearly. Animals are particularly vulnerable, but humans aren't immune. If you're traveling with a group, especially one with children or pets, you need to take extra precautions. The hounds can pick up on vibrations, sound, and even subtle shifts in the air. Your best defense is misdirection. Create false trails, use noise as a decoy, and stay off hard surfaces that amplify your presence. One particularly chilling encounter involved a new type of sentinel, larger than any we've seen before, standing over 30 feet tall. This monstrosity was spotted near the ruins of Sector 19V. It doesn't move often, but when it does, the ground trembles. Survivors described a low-frequency pulse emanating from it, almost like a heartbeat you could feel in your chest. These sentinels are equipped with weapons that don't just destroy, they vaporize. Buildings, vehicles, even trees disappear in bursts of blinding light. If you see one of these, don't run. Running only draws their attention. Instead, hide, get low, find cover, and pray it doesn't linger long. Finally, I want to address a new trend that's been reported. The machines are working together. I've seen drones coordinating with hounds, forming tight patrol grids that leave no room for error. The crab-like machines clear the land, and shortly after, drones and hounds move in to secure the area. This level of coordination suggests that the invaders are learning, adapting, and refining their strategies. They're not just reacting to us, they're anticipating us. Every encounter with these machines is a reminder of what we're up against. They don't tire, they don't feel, and they don't stop. But they're not infallible. They rely on patterns, efficiency, and predictability. That's where we have the advantage. We're chaotic, creative, and stubborn. Use that to your benefit. Study their movements, exploit their blind spots, and remember that every second you survive is a victory they didn't plan for. Survivors, let me bring you up to speed on what I've been hearing from the few brave souls still out there, navigating the ruins of this world. The whispers that reach me aren't always clear, but they paint a picture of resilience and desperation, a testament to the willpower that's kept humanity from fading into nothingness. These reports aren't just stories. They're warnings, lessons, and glimpses into the challenges we all face. From the southern coasts, there's a growing sense of unease. Survivors in those areas have reported something strange beneath the waters. At first, it was dismissed as paranoia, a ripple here, an odd shadow there. But now, there's no denying it. The ocean is no longer safe. Lights have been seen moving beneath the waves, glowing faintly in patterns that seem anything but random. Those who've stayed too close to the water tell of machines. Sleek, silent constructs patrolling the depths. These aren't drones or hounds. They're something else entirely, designed to move effortlessly through liquid. Survivors have also noticed that the water itself is changing, becoming thicker, darker, and more acidic. Fishing, once a desperate source of food, is now a gamble with your life. There's also the matter of the rising tides. Entire stretches of coastline have vanished, swallowed by the encroaching sea. What's left behind is jagged, sharp, and utterly alien. Rocks that gleam with an unnatural sheen and beaches where no life stirs. If you're near the coasts, consider this a warning. The invaders are working on something beneath the surface, and we're not equipped to fight it. Get as far inland as you can and don't look back. Shifting gears to the central zones, a survivor from Zone E2 brought me a chilling account. They were scavenging the remnants of an old factory when they heard a low, rhythmic hum. It wasn't mechanical. It sounded organic, like a heartbeat amplified and distorted. Following the sound, they came across a strange growth spreading along the walls and floor, thick, sinewy tendrils that pulsed faintly with light. The air was warm and damp, filled with a smell they described as rotting metal. They didn't stay long enough to see what it was, and I don't blame them. Whatever this growth is, it's not natural and it's spreading. If you see anything similar, stay clear. The invaders might be terraforming in ways we can't yet understand. Another troubling report comes from the Iron Hollow mines. I've mentioned them before, a potential safe haven for survivors with deep tunnels offering protection from radiation and patrols. But recent accounts suggest the mines may not be as secure as we thought. A group attempting to reach the mines encountered resistance, not from the invaders, but from other survivors. They were met with traps, rigged explosives, spikes, and barricades blocking the entrances. It seems the people in Iron Hollow have turned inward, seeing outsiders as threats rather than allies. I understand their fear, but it's a stark reminder of how fractured we've become. If you're heading toward the mines, approach with caution and be prepared for hostility. In the northern ridges, the situation grows more dire. Supplies are running thin, and scavenging has become a deadly game. A survivor relayed an encounter with a new kind of bait trap. They found a vehicle overturned in the middle of a desolate road, its hood propped open as if it had been abandoned during a desperate escape. Inside, there were signs of a struggle, bloodstains, torn fabric, and a trail leading into the nearby forest. It was a setup. Hidden beneath the ash were thin tripwires connected to makeshift explosives. If the survivor hadn't been paying attention, they wouldn't have made it back. This kind of cruelty isn't just the work of raiders. It's a reflection of how far some will go to survive. If you're scavenging, stay sharp. Assume every convenience is a trap until proven otherwise. Finally, let me share something that feels like a faint glimmer of hope, even in this darkness. Survivors near Red Valley have intercepted a signal, short and deliberate, 3 bursts followed by a pause, repeated on multiple frequencies. It's unmistakably human. Whoever's sending it is organized and determined. The signal doesn't give much away, but it suggests that someone out there is trying to rebuild. A resistance, perhaps, or at the very least, a network of communication. If you're in the area and have the means, keep an ear to the frequencies. This could be the start of something bigger than any of us. Survivor reports are our lifeline to understanding what's happening beyond our immediate sight. Every story, every warning, every fleeting signal carries weight. It's how we piece together the puzzle of this new world and how we find ways to keep going. Keep sharing what you see, no matter how small or strange it might seem. Information is the one weapon they can't strip from us, and it's the one thing that might just save us in the end. Survivors, let's talk about the infected. It's a subject that's as grim as it is necessary, but ignoring it won't make the problem go away. If anything, it's growing worse. The infected aren't just shambling remnants of humanity anymore. They're changing, adapting, and evolving into something far more dangerous. Reports over the past week indicate new patterns of behavior that are both alarming and, frankly, baffling. Survivors near Zone D4 described witnessing infected gathering in groups, but not in the chaotic, aimless way we've come to expect. These groups were deliberate, moving with eerie synchronicity as if they were following some unseen signal. At night, they formed a circle around a burned-out vehicle and stood there, motionless. No sounds, no movement, just silent, unyielding focus. What they were doing or waiting for is anyone's guess. But one thing is clear, they're not acting on instinct alone anymore. Another unsettling development comes from survivors in the outskirts of Ashrock Valley. They reported seeing infected individuals moving through the ruins in a deliberate, almost strategic manner. One survivor described watching from a rooftop as a cluster of infected maneuvered through an old marketplace, avoiding open spaces and sticking to the shadows. These aren't mindless creatures anymore. They're thinking, planning. It's as if they've learned to mimic our survival instincts, which raises the question: are they still evolving, or is something guiding them? Even more chilling are the reports of infected responding to light and sound in ways we haven't seen before. Survivors near Zone F1 described an encounter where shining a flashlight on a single infected individual triggered an immediate and violent reaction, not just from the one illuminated, but from a dozen others lurking in the shadows. It's as though they've developed a hive-like awareness, able to coordinate their actions without any visible communication. If this behavior spreads, it could change everything about how we navigate and defend ourselves. Then there are the vocalizations. Survivors have reported hearing infected emit sounds that go beyond the usual guttural growls and screams. Some described hearing a low, rhythmic clicking, almost like a form of echolocation. Others mentioned guttural, almost word-like utterances that sent chills down their spines. If the infected are developing ways to communicate, or worse, to signal each other, we're entering a whole new level of threat. Silence, already vital for survival, may become our only defense. I need to address another disturbing pattern. The infected are becoming territorial. Survivors near the northern ridges reported finding crude barriers made of debris, broken furniture, twisted metal, and even bones, blocking certain paths. These weren't random piles of junk. They were deliberate, constructed barriers. One group attempted to move through, only to be ambushed by infected hiding in the surrounding ruins. It's as if they've started claiming areas as their own, and intruding on those spaces triggers immediate aggression. If you see signs of these makeshift barricades, turn back. Whatever's beyond them isn't worth the risk. One of the most chilling accounts came from a survivor in Zone B6. They described watching an infected individual mimic human behavior, dragging a scavenged bag of supplies across a field. It wasn't just carrying the bag. It was stumbling in a way that mimicked exhaustion, as if it knew how to appear weak and draw others in. When another survivor approached, thinking they'd found an ally, the infected attacked with sudden, terrifying speed. This isn't just evolution, it's manipulation. Whether it's instinct or some form of higher control, the implications are horrifying. I've also been hearing more about strange clusters of infected that seem to gather around specific objects or locations. Survivors have described infected encircling things like burnt-out generators, piles of rubble, or even symbols etched into the ground. In some cases, they appear to be guarding these objects, while in others, they seem almost entranced, swaying gently as if in a trance. What these objects represent or why the infected are drawn to them remains a mystery, but the behavior is spreading. If you see infected congregating in this way, do not approach. There's no telling what might happen if you interrupt whatever they're doing. Finally, there's the physical evolution of the infected to consider. Survivors in Zone E3 have reported encounters with infected that are faster, stronger, and more resilient than before. One scavenger described being pursued by an infected individual that didn't tire, didn't slow down, and seemed to shrug off injuries that would have incapacitated others. They called it a runner, and if that name sticks, it'll be for good reason. These aren't the slow, shambling figures we've learned to outpace. They're predators and they're relentless. It's clear that the infected are no longer a static threat. They are adapting to us, to the environment, and possibly even to the invaders themselves. Whether this is a natural progression of the infection or something being manipulated by the invaders, I can't say for certain. What I can say is that we need to adapt as quickly as they are. Silence, stealth, and observation are more critical than ever. Watch their movements, learn their patterns, and avoid direct confrontation whenever possible. The infected are changing, and if we're going to survive, we'll need to change too. Survivors, let's talk about scavenging. It's the lifeblood of survival in this fractured world, but it's also a minefield of dangers, literal and metaphorical. Every time you leave your shelter, you're rolling the dice. What you find could mean the difference between life and death, but the risks are higher than ever. The invaders, the infected, and even other survivors are turning scavenging into a deadly game. Over the past week, I've been hearing reports of increasingly sophisticated traps left by desperate or malicious minds. One of the most common setups involves seemingly abandoned vehicles left in plain sight. Survivors in Zone D3 found a car with its hood propped open and supplies scattered around it. Cans of food, a jug of water, and a few tools. It looked like an easy score, but the moment they got close, they triggered a tripwire hidden beneath the ash. The explosion wasn't just meant to kill. It was loud enough to attract infected and drones from the surrounding area. If you see a setup like this, assume it's a trap until proven otherwise. Vehicles, especially ones that appear pristine or conveniently stocked, are rarely what they seem. Speaking of vehicles, abandoned caravans and supply trucks are becoming hotspots for danger. Survivors near the Rust Plains described approaching a truck that looked untouched, only to find strange symbols painted on its side. These markings, spirals, and jagged lines seemed harmless at first, but the area around the truck was littered with strange scorch marks and pieces of melted metal. The truck was bait, possibly left by the invaders or opportunistic raiders to lure in the desperate. They didn't stick around to find out who was responsible, and neither should you. Another trend I've noticed is the use of environmental traps. Survivors near Zone G4 found an old grocery store with the doors wide open, a rare sight, given how most stores were looted in the early days. They ventured inside, only to discover the shelves rigged with thin wires connected to improvised explosives. The blast didn't just collapse the store's entrance, it brought down part of the roof, trapping one of their group inside. If you're scavenging buildings, move carefully. Look for anything out of place: disturbed rubble, wires that shouldn't be there, or piles of debris that seem too conveniently placed. Let's not forget the invaders themselves. They've started using what I can only describe as bait crates. These are small, seemingly abandoned supply containers left in high visibility areas, open fields, crossroads, or even rooftops. Survivors who've approached these crates report hearing a faint hum as they got closer, followed by a sudden activation of drones or mechanical hounds. It's as if the crates are emitting a signal, drawing in anyone nearby to be ambushed. If you see a supply crate in an open area, think twice before approaching. The invaders aren't leaving anything to chance. Another unsettling discovery comes from the ruins of Sector E5, where a group found what looked like a fully intact vending machine in the middle of a crumbled plaza. It was out of place, pristine, and still operational. But as soon as they tried to access it, the ground beneath them gave way, dropping them into a pit lined with jagged metal and spikes. These kinds of traps are becoming more common, blending the lure of pre-apocalypse convenience with post-apocalypse cruelty. If something looks too good to be true, it probably is. Beyond traps, there's the issue of environmental hazards. The storms I mentioned earlier have left many areas coated in ash, glass rain, or strange fluids that eat through metal and skin alike. Survivors near Zone F7 described scavenging an old train yard, only to find pools of shimmering liquid scattered across the ground. One of their group accidentally stepped into it, and within minutes, their boots and lower leg were corroding. If you're scavenging in unfamiliar areas, keep an eye on the ground and avoid anything that doesn't look natural. And if you encounter these fluids, don't touch them and don't try to salvage anything that's been contaminated. I've also heard more stories of survivors turning against each other, using scavenging opportunities as a way to ambush the unsuspecting. In Zone C2, a group was lured into an abandoned house by what they thought was a distress signal: 3 short flashes of light from an upstairs window. Inside, they found no one, just an empty room with the signal device still flickering. It wasn't until they tried to leave that they realized the exits had been barricaded, and armed survivors were waiting outside. The group barely made it out, but it's a reminder that trust is a rare and dangerous thing these days. The rules of scavenging are changing, and the risks are multiplying. The days of simply searching for supplies are over. Now, every decision, every step has to be calculated. Check every corner, question every convenience, and trust nothing that seems too easy. Whether it's a vehicle, a building, or a supply crate, assume someone or something is waiting for you to make a mistake. The cost of being careless isn't just losing what you've found, it's losing your life. Scavenging is survival, but it's also a test of wit, caution, and adaptability. Every time you head out, you're gambling with everything you have left. Make sure the stakes are worth it. Survivors, let's turn to something that feels like a faint glimmer of hope, even amidst all this chaos. Over the last few days, I've intercepted signals, faint and scattered but deliberate, emanating from what I believe to be a growing resistance network. These aren't random bursts of static or the chaotic chatter of desperate survivors. These signals are organized, encoded, and persistent signs of people who are not just surviving but actively pushing back. One of the most promising signals is coming out of the ruins near Red Valley. It's short and simple, 3 bursts of sound followed by a pause, repeated on multiple frequencies. It's a call sign, a beacon, and it's spreading. Whoever's behind it knows how to stay under the invader's radar, using old military encryption that scrambles the transmission just enough to make it difficult for anyone untrained to decode. The message itself is vague, but the intent is clear. They're organizing, recruiting, and looking for allies. For those of you near Red Valley, this could be an opportunity, but it's not without risk. The area is treacherous, littered with collapsed structures and patrolled regularly by drones. Survivors who ventured close to the signal's source describe it as a labyrinth of ruins, where the invaders' influence is palpable. Symbols etched into walls, strange machines embedded in the ground. Whatever's happening in Red Valley, it's bigger than just another safe zone. If you're planning to investigate, do so cautiously. The resistance may be strong, but so are the invaders' efforts to root them out. This isn't the only signal. Further north, near Sector E3, another frequency has come to life, a repeating tone interspersed with faint snippets of Morse code. It's harder to interpret, but from what I've managed to decode, it mentions supply cache coordinates and a meeting point. It's unclear whether this is a genuine effort to aid survivors or a trap laid by raiders or invaders. If you're considering following this signal, keep your wits about you. Approach with caution, and never assume good intentions without proof. Another noteworthy development comes from a survivor who managed to infiltrate an invader staging area in Zone F5. They described seeing what looked like human prisoners being moved in small groups, guarded by drones and mechanical hounds. The prisoners were silent, their heads covered, but one managed to slip a note to the survivor before they were dragged away. The note read, "Rust Plains, Convergence." That's all. No context, no explanation. But the mention of the Rust Plains aligns with other signals I've picked up. Something is happening there, something important enough for the invaders to keep it tightly controlled. If you're anywhere near the Rust Plains, pay attention to your surroundings. Survivors have reported increased patrols, strange lights in the sky at night, and an almost constant hum that vibrates through the ground. The invaders are focused on this area, and wherever they focus, there's potential for opportunity or catastrophe. If you can gather intel safely, it might help us piece together what they're planning. While the resistance signals are encouraging, they're also a double-edged sword. The invaders are adapting to our methods of communication, intercepting and distorting messages to sow confusion. Survivors near Zone D7 described receiving a transmission they thought was from an ally group, only to arrive at the meeting point and find themselves surrounded by drones. The invaders are using our desperation against us, creating fake signals and luring survivors into traps. If you're relying on radio transmissions, cross-reference the information with what you know about the area. If something feels off, trust your instincts. On the brighter side, I've heard whispers of alliances forming between smaller survivor groups. In Zone B3, two factions that had been at odds for months have reportedly come together, pooling resources and manpower to fortify a shared shelter. This kind of cooperation is rare, but it's exactly what we need to stand a chance. Alone, we're vulnerable. Together, we're something the invaders can't easily predict or dismantle. If you're part of a group, consider reaching out to others. Trust is a fragile thing, but it might be our most powerful weapon. For those of you with working radios or transmitters, you can contribute to this effort. Boosting signals, sharing coordinates, and relaying messages can make the difference between isolation and connection. But remember, every transmission is a risk. The invaders are listening, and their technology is far beyond what we can fully understand. Use encryption if you can. If you don't know how, keep your messages short and vague. Never share exact locations unless you're absolutely certain of who's receiving them. This is the fight we're in now, a battle of signals, of whispers in the static, of connections forged in the shadows. Every message, every relay, every faint tone on the airwaves is a reminder that we're still here, still fighting, still refusing to let this world break us. The resistance is growing, but it needs us to be smart, careful, and united. Keep listening, survivors. The signals are faint, but they're out there, and they're proof that we're not alone. Survivors, let's talk about something we don't address nearly enough: the toll this existence takes on the mind. Out there, every second is a battle against the invaders, the infected, and the environment. But the hardest battles are often the ones we fight within ourselves. Fear, despair, isolation. They're as deadly as any drone or trap, and they're harder to see coming. I've spoken to survivors who've described feeling like the world is actively erasing them. The silence, the loss of familiar landmarks, the constant sense that the ground beneath their feet could shift or vanish at any moment. It all adds up. Even the air feels different now, heavy with ash and tension, pressing down on you until it's hard to breathe. It's no wonder that so many of us are struggling to hold on. One of the most common feelings I hear about is guilt. Survivors wrestle with choices they've made, leaving someone behind, taking more than their share, or simply not being able to save everyone they cared about. Guilt has a way of sinking its claws in, making you question whether you even deserve to survive. But hear me when I say this: survival isn't about deserving. It's about adapting, about finding the strength to keep moving forward. You didn't choose this world, but you're navigating it the best way you can, and that's all anyone can ask of you. Another pervasive enemy is loneliness. For those of you who are on your own, I know how the quiet can eat away at you. The absence of voices, the lack of touch, the weight of knowing there's no one to share your burdens. It's a kind of emptiness that defies description. But loneliness doesn't mean you're truly alone. Every time you hear this broadcast, every time you see signs of other survivors, it's proof that we're still connected, even if it's in fragments. Hold on to that connection, however tenuous it might feel. Then there's the exhaustion, not just the physical kind, but the bone-deep fatigue that comes from living in constant fight-or-flight mode. It's the weariness that whispers for you to stop, to let go, to just let the end come and be done with it. But you can't listen to that voice. That voice is a liar, and it doesn't deserve to win. Rest when you can, even if it's just a few stolen moments. Close your eyes, breathe, and remind yourself that every day you've made it through is a victory. The world wants you to believe you're powerless, but the fact that you're still here proves otherwise. Coping with this new reality isn't easy, but there are things you can do to stay grounded. For one, establish routines, however small. Even something as simple as organizing your supplies or marking the days on a wall can give you a sense of structure in a world that's lost all predictability. Routines anchor you, remind you that you're still in control of at least one part of your life. Another tool is finding purpose. Survival for survival's sake can feel hollow, but if you tie it to something larger, helping others, documenting the world as it is now, or simply keeping a memory alive, it can give you the strength to keep going. Purpose doesn't have to be grand. It can be as small as protecting a single keepsake or as big as mapping out safe zones for others to use. Whatever it is, hold on to it. Let it be your guiding star when the darkness feels overwhelming. Connection, even in small doses, is another lifeline. If you come across other survivors, weigh the risks carefully, but don't shut yourself off completely. A kind word, a shared meal, even a fleeting moment of trust can remind you of what it means to be human. And if you're not ready for direct interaction, leave signs, messages, markers, anything that lets others know you are there and that they're not alone. Sometimes, just knowing someone else has walked the same path can make all the difference. For those of you traveling with others, remember that tension is inevitable. The stress of survival brings out the worst in all of us at times, but it's crucial to communicate and find ways to work together. A fractured group is a vulnerable group, and the invaders thrive on our division. If you're struggling to stay united, focus on shared goals and remind each other of why you're still fighting. Unity doesn't mean perfection. It means choosing to stand together even when it's hard. Finally, don't underestimate the power of small joys. A sunrise, a scrap of music from a salvaged radio, a memory of something good. It might feel trivial, but it's not. These moments are what remind us why we're fighting to hold on. They're proof that even in the ashes, there's still beauty to be found. Seek them out, cling to them, and let them fuel you. The psychological toll of this world is immense, but it's not insurmountable. You're stronger than you realize, and every day you endure is a testament to that strength. This isn't just survival, it's defiance. It's a refusal to let the invaders, the infected, or the chaos take away what makes us human. And as long as you're holding on, you're winning a battle they never expected us to fight. Stay strong, survivors. You're not alone in this fight, no matter how much it might feel that way. We're all in this together, connected by the threads of resilience and determination. Hold on to those threads and don't let go. Survivors, let's talk about the skies above and the ground beneath your feet. because neither is what it used to be. The world itself is shifting, transforming in ways that defy everything we once knew about nature. This isn't just weather anymore. It's something far more dangerous and unpredictable. If you're not paying attention to these changes, you're not just at risk, you're already losing the fight. Over the past week, reports of bizarre weather phenomena have been pouring in. In Zone C6, survivors described a rainstorm that came out of nowhere, drenching the area in minutes. But this wasn't water. It was a viscous, gray liquid that clung to everything it touched. Clothes became heavy, skin itched and burned, and within hours, plants in the area had withered to black husks. Whatever fell from the sky wasn't natural, and the damage it left behind made the area uninhabitable. If you see dark clouds forming unnaturally fast or moving against the wind, take cover immediately and don't assume it's just rain. Then there's the fog. Survivors near the northern ridges have reported a dense, rolling mist that seems to move with intent. It's not just obscuring vision, it's silencing everything around it. Footsteps, voices, even the sound of the wind gets swallowed up. Those who ventured into the fog describe a feeling of being watched, of something just beyond sight following their every move. In a few cases, people have gone in and not come out. If you see the fog, stay out of its path. Whatever's inside it, you don't want to find out. On the ground, the changes are just as alarming. The earth is shifting, not in the way of natural erosion or weathering, but as if it's being rewritten. Survivors near Zone E8 reported a series of perfectly circular sinkholes appearing overnight. These weren't random, they were spaced evenly apart, each one nearly identical in size and depth. The ground around them felt warm to the touch, and there was a faint hum emanating from the deepest holes. What's causing this? No one knows, but it's clear the invaders have a hand in it, and whatever they're doing is reshaping the land itself. Rivers and streams, once a vital resource, are no longer reliable. Survivors near Ashrock Valley described a river that turned an iridescent blue overnight, glowing faintly in the dark. The water itself was warm and carried an oily sheen on its surface. Anyone who drank it became violently ill, with symptoms ranging from nausea to hallucinations. One survivor claimed they saw figures moving beneath the water, shadowy shapes that disappeared as soon as they got close. Whether this is contamination from the invaders' machines or something more deliberate, it's clear. Water sources are no longer safe without thorough testing and filtration. The skies aren't just bringing strange rain and fog. There have been reports of lights, flashes of bright, unnatural colors that streak across the horizon and disappear as quickly as they appear. In Zone F3, survivors described a series of pulsing green lights that appeared at regular intervals, almost like a signal. These lights were accompanied by a low-frequency hum that caused headaches and disorientation. Drones appeared shortly after, as if responding to the lights, scanning the area before disappearing into the distance. If you see these lights, assume the invaders are nearby. They're not just a spectacle, they're a warning. Survivors in Zone G2 encountered another strange phenomenon: spiraling grass patterns that appeared overnight. The grass itself wasn't cut or trampled. It was bent at perfect angles, forming intricate, geometric designs that seemed to pulse faintly when touched. Those who walked through the area described an overwhelming sense of unease, as if the patterns were alive or reacting to their presence. This isn't the work of natural forces. It's deliberate, calculated, and deeply unsettling. Even the air feels different now. Survivors in Zone B5 described a metallic tang in the air, accompanied by a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. Those who stayed too long reported dizziness, nosebleeds, and a sense of their skin crawling. The area also became unnaturally cold, with frost forming on the ground despite the season. If you notice these changes, leave immediately. The environment is no longer just a backdrop. It's becoming a weapon. What's most troubling is that these phenomena aren't isolated. They're spreading, overlapping, and creating areas where survival becomes nearly impossible. The invaders aren't just fighting us directly. They're using the world itself to push us into smaller, more desperate spaces. If you don't adapt, if you don't learn to read these signs, you'll find yourself caught in their traps before you even realize what's happening. This isn't the Earth we knew. It's becoming something else, something shaped by forces we barely understand. But understanding isn't a luxury we can afford right now. Survival is about observation, intuition, and action. Pay attention to the skies, the ground, and the air. These changes aren't just happening around us, they're targeting us. Stay vigilant, stay adaptable, and never assume the environment is on your side. The world is shifting beneath our feet, survivors. But we're still here, and that means we're still in this fight. Watch the signs, and don't let the world catch you off guard. Survivors, it's time to focus on the enemy. The invaders aren't just adapting, they're innovating, and their tactics are becoming more sophisticated by the day. They're not content to rely on brute force or overwhelming numbers anymore. What we're seeing now is precision, calculation, and a chilling level of intent. If we're going to stand a chance, we need to understand how they're evolving and how we can counteract their advancements. Let's start with their drones. These machines have always been a threat, but recent encounters suggest they've been upgraded. Survivors near Zone F4 described a new model, sleeker, faster, and nearly silent. Unlike the older drones that relied on visible light, these new ones use infrared and other unknown scanning methods, making it almost impossible to hide from them without specialized shielding. Survivors who thought they were concealed by debris or vegetation found themselves exposed when the drones hovered overhead, emitting a faint pulse of energy. This pulse didn't just scan the area. It seemed to disrupt electronics and even disorient people nearby. If you're relying on hiding, you'll need to rethink your strategy. These machines are smarter now, and so must we be. Then there are the mechanical hounds. I've talked about them before, relentless, fast, and nearly indestructible. But reports from Zone E7 describe something even more terrifying. Packs. These hounds are now operating in groups, coordinating their movements to herd survivors into traps. One group of survivors described being cornered by 3 hounds that moved in perfect sync, cutting off all escape routes. The hounds didn't just rely on brute force. They used their environment, triggering landslides and blocking paths to ensure there was no way out. If you encounter one hound, assume there are more nearby and plan your escape accordingly. The sentinels, towering and seemingly unstoppable, have also seen changes. Survivors in Zone G3 reported seeing a sentinel that didn't just patrol. It seemed to act as a command center for the drones and hounds in the area. This sentinel emitted a rhythmic, low-frequency pulse that appeared to synchronize the movements of all the invader machines within its range. Survivors who tried to evade the drones found their paths intercepted by hounds, as if the machines were sharing information in real time. If this is the new standard, it means the invaders are creating a networked intelligence that makes every encounter more dangerous than the last. Another disturbing development comes in the form of traps, ones that go beyond simple bait and ambush tactics. Survivors near Zone B8 discovered what looked like a destroyed invader structure, half buried in rubble. Thinking it was safe, they approached, only for the entire area to erupt in a blinding light. The survivors described feeling a wave of heat and pressure, followed by a disorienting hum that left them unable to move for several minutes. This wasn't just a trap, it was a test, a way for the invaders to incapacitate without killing. Whether this was an attempt to capture or experiment on survivors is unclear, but it's a chilling reminder that their technology isn't static. I've also been hearing more about their terraforming devices, large monolithic structures that seem to warp the land around them. Survivors near the Rust Plains described one such structure emitting beams of light that spiraled into the sky. The air grew heavy, and the ground beneath them began to ripple like water. Plants within a 100-meter radius withered instantly, and the survivors felt an overwhelming pressure, like their bodies were being crushed from the inside out. These devices aren't just altering the environment, they're weaponizing it. If you see one, stay as far away as possible. Whatever their purpose, proximity seems to be fatal. The invaders' psychological warfare is another layer to consider. Survivors in Zone C5 reported hearing voices while scavenging, a faint, familiar sound that drew them deeper into a ruined building. The voices weren't random. They mimicked loved ones, calling out for help. When the survivors followed the sound, they found themselves in an ambush, surrounded by drones and trapped by collapsing walls. This isn't just technology. It's manipulation on a deeply personal level. If you hear something that feels too specific, too targeted, resist the urge to investigate. The invaders are using our emotions against us. Finally, there's the matter of their precision strikes. Over the past few days, survivors in multiple zones have reported sudden, targeted attacks. Buildings collapsing with no warning, vehicles exploding as if detonated remotely. These aren't random acts of destruction. The invaders are targeting areas where survivors are likely to gather or hide, systematically cutting off potential safe zones. It's as if they're mapping our movements, learning our habits, and eliminating any place we might consider refuge. If you think you've found a safe spot, assume it's temporary and have an exit strategy ready at all times. What all of this tells us is that the invaders are evolving faster than we can fully comprehend. They're not just reacting, they're anticipating, adapting, and refining their methods. But their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness: predictability. They rely on systems, algorithms, and efficiency. That's where we come in. Our unpredictability, our ability to think creatively and act on instinct, is something they can't replicate. Use that to your advantage. Study their patterns, exploit their blind spots, and never let them see you coming. The invaders are pushing harder than ever, survivors. But every tactic, every piece of technology they use against us is a lesson. Learn from them, adapt, and stay one step ahead. This fight isn't over, not as long as we're still here. Survivors, as I sit here, watching the faint flicker of the backup generator keeping this signal alive, I'm reminded of one simple truth: we're still here. Against all odds, against the crushing weight of what's been taken from us, we endure. But survival isn't just a testament to our resilience, it's a defiance of everything trying to snuff us out. I know it's hard to hold on. The world we knew is gone, replaced by something hostile, unrelenting, and alien in every sense of the word. The invaders have stripped away the comforts and certainties we took for granted, leaving us to navigate a landscape that changes with every sunrise. And yet, even in this chaos, we find ways to adapt, to survive, to resist. That says more about who we are than anything that came before. Every day is a test. The air we breathe, the ground we walk on, the choices we make, they're all fraught with danger. But in those moments of uncertainty, when the weight of it all feels too much, remember this: you've already survived the unimaginable. The first blast, the panic, the loss. You've endured horrors that would break lesser spirits. That strength is yours, and it's unshakable, no matter how much the world tries to convince you otherwise. I've heard stories from survivors who found ways to hold on to slivers of hope in the darkest places. A scavenger in Zone B3 discovered an old photograph beneath the rubble of a collapsed building. A family smiling on a sunny day that feels like it belongs to another life entirely. She keeps that photo tucked into her pack, a reminder of what we've lost, but also of what we fight to preserve. It's not about the past. It's about the possibility of a future where moments like that can exist again. Hope doesn't have to be grand or shiny. Sometimes, it's as small as a warm meal shared with a stranger or the first rays of sunlight breaking through an ash-filled sky. These moments are fleeting, but they're powerful. They remind us of why we keep going, why we refuse to let the invaders define what's left of our humanity. There's something else I want to remind you of. You're not alone. It's easy to feel like the last person on Earth when the world is this quiet, but every signal I receive, every voice that breaks through the static, is proof that we're still connected. We may be scattered, but we're not broken. Each of us is a thread in a larger tapestry, weaving a story of survival that's stronger than anything the invaders can destroy. For those of you listening who feel like giving up, I get it. I've been there too, staring at the edge of the abyss and wondering if it's worth it to keep fighting. But the answer every single time is yes. Not because it's easy or because the path ahead is clear, but because survival itself is an act of rebellion. It's a way of saying to the invaders, to the infected, to the very chaos of the world, you don't get to decide when I'm done. The road ahead is uncertain. We'll face more dangers, more losses, more moments where the fight feels impossible. But we'll also find strength in places we didn't know existed. In ourselves, in each other, in the small but vital victories we carve out of the wreckage. Those victories matter, no matter how insignificant they might seem in the moment. Think of the invaders. They came here expecting to break us, to wipe us out with their precision and technology. They saw us as weak, fragmented, and unworthy of the world we built. But what they didn't understand, what they still don't understand, is that humanity isn't defined by its structures or its tools. It's defined by its spirit, by the unyielding drive to push forward, to create, to connect. That's something they'll never have, and it's why they'll never truly win. As I sit here broadcasting into the void, I know the odds we're up against. I know how heavy this fight is, how relentless the struggle feels. But I also know this: as long as we keep moving, keep adapting, and keep holding on to that spark inside us, we're not beaten. Not yet, not ever. Wherever you are, however you're surviving, take a moment to breathe. Feel the weight of your body, the beat of your heart, the rush of air filling your lungs. These simple things are victories, proof that you're still here. And as long as you're here, there's hope for another day, another chance, another step forward. Survivors, you are stronger than you realize. Every choice you make to keep going, every moment you endure, is a testament to that strength. Hold on to it. Let it guide you through the darkness, and never forget that you are part of something bigger. Together, even in our isolation, we are a force they never anticipated, a resistance they'll never fully understand. Keep fighting, keep surviving, and know that as long as this signal reaches you, you're not alone. You're part of a story that isn't finished yet, and I, for one, can't wait to see how it ends. Stay strong, survivors. You've got this.